Welcome everybody to the post-party morning edition of the conference. It's great to see you all here. We had a question we were curious about. Can we see a show of hands for people who this is their first Plone conference? Awesome. That's fantastic. And we wish you many more. I just wanted to point out just a couple things, and then we'll move right on to the Integrator talk, to the keynote speech. Some of you are probably remember thinking machines back in the day, one of the original supercomputers, or really the original commercial supercomputer. That big black thing that's right by the door to the auditorium is the case of one of the first thinking machine supercomputers. So, fun fact about being at MIT is you get to see these cool artifacts. Let's see. I want to announce a couple things, point out to people that the lightning talk and bird of the feather sign-up sheets are right near the food area. You've probably already discovered, but please sign up. We'd love to have more lightning talks and buffs. The group photo is going to be after this keynote in the courtyard. So go up to the first floor or just walk around. There's a courtyard kind of behind, off the street, and there's this gorgeous big yellow tree that we thought would be a good place to have a group photo under. So don't race back to Nerd. Proceed to the yellow tree for the group photo. We have extra t-shirts, so they're going to be for sale for the rest of the conference. They're $15. And we also have some extra glasses, so if you'd like to have a set of 2 instead of just 1, those are also available for sale. And $5 is what you decided on, Chris? $5 for the glasses. So some of you brought family, which is Ah, okay. Ah, great. Problem solved. So some of you are here with family, and Doug, the super volunteer, my husband, is offering to take some sort of guided tours of some family-friendly locations in Boston. So this could include things like the Charles Street area, which is a kind of very pretty old part of Boston, walking over to the public garden where there are the Make Way for Ducklings little statues that kids can get on. Various other possibilities, and so what I'd like to suggest is if any of you who are interested in a sort of a guided tour kind of thing for significant others, family, whatever, find me and we'll try to figure out when are the best times. We could do this in the afternoon, today, tomorrow. We could do this during the sprints over the weekend. So come see me and we'll talk about when would be the best time to arrange such a thing, or we could do it a couple days, that would be fine too. So Doug's Guided Tours, come see me. And finally, excuse me, tonight, the Seaport is the designated area for our socializing. Seaport used to be like more of a working port and pretty grungy back in the 70s. But over the last bunch of years since the convention center got built down there, it's gotten more and more like the place to be. So there's sort of an old area and a new area, and there are a bunch of restaurants. I'll just point out a couple that might be of interest. The Barking Crab is just really fun, and it has this huge outdoor area. So if we wanted to select a place where everybody could certainly fit there and be rowdy, it's a fun place. For the foodies among you, there are 2 restaurants, each owned by a famous chef. There's Babbo Pizzeria, which is owned by Mario Batali, is right down in Seafood and Seaport, and the Blue Dragon, which is owned by Ming Tsai, who's like a celebrity Chinese chef, is also down there. So, and there are just tons of restaurants, seafood, oysters, row 34 for oysters, lots of possibilities. So looking forward to seeing you again tonight. All right. Anybody else have any other announcements before we get going? Great. So I get to introduce Annette, which I'm really excited about. Chris and I first Annette came into our sphere of consciousness at Bucharest last year when Eric said to Chris, you got to see what this woman who works at Penn State can do with Plone through the web. And I think you did a little demo for Eric, for Chris, who was completely blown away. And when we started talking about keynotes for the conference, we just instantly said, Annette's got to be one of the keynotes because of the amazing things she does through the web with Plone. And I will say no more about that, except that she's got amazing superpowers. And it wasn't until about 3 weeks ago, when Kim tweeted out the photo of her with the hula hoops. I had no idea about that side, but those of you who were at the party last night know that Plone is not the only superpower this woman possesses. She's absolutely amazing in many respects. So we're really excited and happy that Annette is going to be able to speak to us about her super integrator powers. So give Annette a hand.
Okay, so first test, I want to make sure this is on. Yay, okay. So I'm not the type of person that likes to stay attached to the podium. So my name's Annette. Hi, good morning. Good morning. And my presentation is the super integrator, not self-proclaimed, but humbly accepted. Just as a disclaimer there. So let's go with, does that change? There we go. How did I even get here in the first place? So I'm really new to Plone, as in 3 years. July of 2013, I was hired as a web content migration specialist, which is a fancy term for copy and paste things from one place to another. And I had never heard about the word Plone before that job description when I read it, which surprised me. I'd used Drupal, text pattern, WordPress, Joomla, pretty much everything under the sun that was apparently PHP. But Python, Plone, had no idea. But I'm like, I've been using CMSs for years. It's got to be easy. I'm just going to load it up, and we're going to go. And I couldn't have been more wrong. So I run PC. I've been PC most of my life, so I struggled. I got a copy of Ubuntu on my way too old to even do it in the first place laptop, spun up a free copy of VMware, got Ubuntu installed, got the unified installer, somehow made it through that treacherous path, got Plone running, and I was just like, nothing. Deer in headlights, everything's gone. I just felt like I had no way to do that. So it was a whole new uncharted territory, but that wouldn't stop me from applying for that job. So about me and my team and where I work. So now I work at Penn State. I've been there since, once again, July of 2013. And so my role is at Penn State University, main campus, in the College of Liberal Arts, in the IT department on the web team. I work doing websites, and particularly building Plone websites and moving static into Plone. So we're a centralized department for all of the College of Liberal Arts, which means we get to do it all. So my job is specifically to consult with stakeholders who can be either department heads, the deans, or even a graduate student that works in a lab because the lab director did not feel like talking to us. We talk to them, we get their ideas, we go back and translate it into actual attainable ideas, brainstorm, we make a couple design mock-ups, send it back and forth, polish it, figure out what they actually want, the colors, all that little thing. We finally, well, the deliver step is a lot larger than that one block, because we deliver it, they get to look at it, make critique, and then we go rounds and rounds again, and then we give it to them. So at the end of that, we even give them a complete training, so if they want to be completely autonomous of us, they know how to update their site. And if they don't, we can help them, or any stage in between. So one of the first things we did is when I got in there was only one developer and one graphic designer, and the graphic designer had only been there 1 year. We got a project manager finally, and I came in, but my predecessor actually left in October of that same year, so I became the one as far as doing websites goes. And we did the math. 120 websites about back then, one website per month, it would take me 10 years to touch every website and get them designed. That's not a good plan. Thankfully, let me see here. Nope. Well, thankfully, we hired 2 more developers, so 3 of us, that brings us down to 3.3 years. A little better in the life cycle of a site, but it means speed was going to be a big thing for us. Oh, there it goes. So, who we are. I always talk about my team whenever I'm talking about anything because we really all come together to make everything happen. And so we've got our 2 graphic designers, we've got 3 developers, we've got Joshua who's back there somewhere, I think. Hi, Josh. He came along, I'm very happy, but he does a lot of the help desk and helping the clients get accustomed to their sites and making updates. So we'd formed a solid team to do what we needed to do. And a little bit about what we support. We have 23 departments, and they're very different departments. We've got 10 interdepartmental programs that we kind of split with other colleges, 16 centers and institutes, which are just little projects that pop up anywhere, lots of labs. Like, since we have psychology, anthropology, all of those split off in all kinds of different labs, and we help most of them. And then finally, other college initiatives, plans, campaigns. So that adds up to well over 100 sites. It was 120-ish when I was here, and I'm pretty sure we're nearing 160, getting much closer to 200 now. Not all of them are in Plone, but I would guess between 40 and 60 are in Plone right now. So a little bit about how our server is that we have a production and a development server. Each of those have 13 build-outs that are supposed to mirror each other. And in those 13 build-outs, I think on my last count, some of them have as much as 17 sites. Some of them have 1. So we've got a lot of things to keep going, but it also means we need to keep everything in sync and make sure they're all in the same environment and on the same level. So just kind of going through, this is probably a more typical scale. Like if you can see in Q1, we finished 8 new sites, in Q2, 7. That also depends on how soon they need it. So if somebody donates $1 million and it's going to be in the newspaper in 3 months or a month, we got to get that site out before that newspaper hits. And so with 3 developers, we were doing pretty good, I think. And my boss likes to keep ahead of us to make sure that we have plenty of things to do. So as you can see, we've got our 3 developers at the bottom there. So that was like our track lines in that time of year. And then all of those little projects are people he's talked to or contacted in some phase of that VOC, which you call voice of the client, when we're starting to figure out what they actually want. So plenty to do. Job security. So now my story and how it really begins, like how I got here to Boston this year. And I was working on Penn State's, like our flagship site for College of the Liberal Arts, which is the College of the Liberal Arts site. And it was big, really big. And we had a lot of stuff to do. It was pushing me to my limits. And once again, I think I'd been there maybe 1.5 years at that point and using Plone at that point. So we had a lot of things to do. And I remember we were at a Plone users group. So Eric Steele comes to the Plone users group in State College. It's been great to have that as like mentors and people to listen to. And so it got kind of quiet, and in the lull, I decided to speak up. I'm like, I've been working on something. And it was the liberal arts site, and I started like showing it off. And I remember, I don't remember the exact phrase, but like he kind of just looked up and was like, wait, you're doing this through the web? I'm like, yeah. And then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh gosh, did I make a mistake? I don't know what's happening. It seemed to work. And I still feel like that most times. So everyone's been so warm with me so far, so I'm getting some of my confidence now. So where we start, and now getting into actually how we build our sites, we have 2 parts, and I can thank my predecessor for this, and I'm not sure where she got it, so whoever did that, if there's another person, thank you. But we have a theme product that is a stripped-down version of Sunburst. So we're getting rid of anything that has the important tag, so we don't have to import the importance and overpower that, and like trying to make it a flat thing to start with. And then we have a Diazo theme, which is totally through the web. We Right now, just kind of go to the main build out that I have it on and we download it. But with some of this great training, I'm pretty sure I can get that to actually be deployed and we can just copy and paste it instead directly from something that's installed. So this is kind of what our theme looks like to start. As I said, very stripped down, minimal, it's a nice clean slate. And then we've got the actual base theme, which gives us a little more structure, and I just tried to get some of the basics down. Essentially, if I repeated it every time I built the site, it was something I tried to incorporate at this point so I wouldn't be needlessly doing the same actions. And then the fun part is when you actually do the theming. And so this is my first site that I did. I think I was 2 weeks at Penn State when they're like, hey, you can do this. I was like, great. So they're all the same base theme. This was my second site. And I had 1 week to do it because they were about to get like a big grant announcement. That was fun. They didn't approve it for like the next half year, but at least it was done. Then we also have some other sites. This was kind of more in the middle of the road. I'm starting to like feel where I can actually do and get to know Diazo. And we've got this one. So I'm progressing, I'm getting more daring. And it's not necessarily me. My graphic designer hands me this stuff. I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. I'm gonna do it as close as I can. And now some of the more recent things I've done, like the last couple of months. And you can always tell where the graphic design is going. Like this one has a trend, that nice clean look, the wide images, and the flagship site, which was not the last thing I did, but it's holding up pretty well. And I'm hoping they're not going to change it for at least 3 years, so we get some time to get through those other sites that we need to touch. So finding my way around Plone. That was, as I said, trial and error builds character, but it also eats up time. And having worked with other CMSs and done little programming projects, I'm not a developer, but I can be dangerous when I want to. I tried a couple of things. One thing I tried was a random image script because I really, really wanted to be able to use CSS to load my images, because the second site I showed you guys, they decided, well, this image is going to be this size, and this one's going to be this size, and this one's going to be this long. So when their slider goes around, the content does this lovely wavy dance. And I didn't want that to happen. So I said, okay, if they want random images on refresh, I'm going to write a Python script that sends the data back as an image MIME type. It'll load, it'll be great, and I can use CSS contain to keep it in that box forever. Good starting, but most people know images get cached, and it's not even at the load balancer level. It's at your browser level. So when I gave it to the person, I did hard refreshes, because that's just what I do. I'm a programmer. And they're like, it's the same image. What do you mean it's the same image? And that's when it dawned on me, okay, this is not a sustainable practice. I need to find another way. That was an error. It took a lot of time, but I learned from it. Now, another thing I did is with that econ site, Dexterity. I'm like, this is great. I can make a custom content item to do exactly what I want, completely through the web. That's not going to be really indexed. That I can't index it well because it was a resume with a middle, first, and last name. So what do you index at that point when they want it in alphabetical order? Well, I'm like, okay, you can drag and drop in order. That's not very customer friendly, because when they had like maybe 20-something students for 1 year, and they have to go find it and drag it all in order and make sure they have all the names, especially when some names are Chinese and some are Spanish and some are Korean, trying to figure that out. Not going to be a good idea. They ditched that pretty soon after, although it did look beautiful when I did it the first time. And then my last, probably biggest thing where I'm just like, okay, this is where you really learn to be more cautious of what you're doing, is with the LA site, our flagship site, they wanted drop-downs, and we had managed to navigate so well without giving anybody a hover drop-down menu so far. And I was determined not to use the products out there because I wanted it to be flexible. We've got so many editors. There's probably like between 3 to 5 editors per section, per tab. So like in graduate, you can have like the graduate, and the graduate advisors, and like the students who help. And so we've got a lot of people we're covering. I don't know who's going to change the menu at any given point in time and what they're going to do. So we wanted to stay away from something that would lock them down and have to make them rely on us to make updates. So I subclassed the navigation feature, pulled in the sitemap feature, and made that my awesome collapsing mobile menu, which every time it was hit made the Plone site generate this crazy menu, and some of those levels were 7 levels deep of links. That grinded that page to a dead halt. So I had to really reverse myself very quickly. I gave them 1 level of drop-downs, which is what the main site mirrored, took out some stuff and made another navigation that looked a little bit nicer and kind of gave them what they wanted. They seemed happy enough. I remember my director's like, no, but we can still work on that. And I'm thinking, no, we can't. Not even Memcache was saving me at that point. So I got through a couple of trials and errors, and when you have a site where your graphic designer sends you these as just a couple of your style guide notes, and we had 20 different PDFs, each with several pages of details about each and every page and how they would be, and it was a mix and match. Any element you can see up there was a possible block that they were going to step in there. And I didn't know about Plone App Mosaic at the time. That would have been perfect, but I had to improvise on myself. So that's when I realized I need easily reusable blocks that I can call when I need to. And the other thing that I really learned is that being able to use it doesn't mean you should. I had to be realistic with what we needed to do and how we needed to do it. More importantly, if it exists, don't recreate it. So if Plone could give me that information in one way or another, I could find a way to improve on that further to get to the end goal that I wanted to get to. And that's when it really all started. That was the seed that was going to start driving the way I do things. So my solution, once again, get it on the page the simplest way possible, and then leverage Diazo or abuse it outrightly to put it in the right places. And that's where I was able to really start working. So here is kind of a breakdown, not detailed, but just kind of shows you kind of what I like to do. And let me see. There's a little kind of laser thing. There you go. OK, yeah. So right up here, that's kind of like the default menu when we have Diazo off with just the base theme going. It's just a navigation portlet. But I took Diazo and go away bar. Oh, well. OK. Let me try that again. There we go. Start to present. And all right. It's really determined to do that. All right, there we go. So I was able to transform that into a prettier menu. But this set of circles right here is the same exact thing as those, just rewritten in Diazo. I moved it around, so now my portlet header is now my label down at the bottom there. And this is the same menu. It's actually all CSS and no graphics to get that look that she had in her mockup. And I think I did a pretty good job because she couldn't remember which one was the PDF and which one was the website when she was giving me my QA. That's a win. So using Diazo to its fullest. This is where I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit to the details. So this is a good time to ask, how many people use Diazo technically? All right, I've got a good amount of people. So now I'm not going to feel too bad about all the XPath and stuff I'm about to throw up on the screen. All right, so this is one of the things I did is how do I put something in a good semantic basis that they need to be able to update at any time? Well, I made a table. That's pretty clear. You fill in the slots. It's like a form without using a form. And if you look on the right here, I've got kind of the HTML for that table. And you'll see that I have IDs on all of these tags. So what I can do with Diazo is look for these IDs and place them into what I'm going for. So this is kind of some of my rewrite rules. And you'll see I have on the right is the finished HTML. And on the left is actually my rule. So the first thing I'm doing at the very top of that box is the portlet static contact us. That way it has a solid name. I know this block is what I need to look for. So once I match that block, now I can start redeveloping and designing that block. Now I specifically highlighted street address because I had that open over here. But you can see And using this many wildcards is probably not a good idea, disclaimer, but I'm still learning that part. But I used a wildcard and I said, okay, if I can find a table row with that ID of 80-street, then what I was going to do is build that value into it. So now street address pulls that value from that table on that row. And I also did email because the one thing that's really awesome about XPath and why I started using a lot of XPath over CSS and selects is that you can access like the attributes. So kind of right over here over this box, you can see like it's the email, but I'm getting the class of the A. I'm also getting the URL and the title. So without having to copy the whole object, I can copy pieces of it. And the reason I do that primarily is for our poor help desk guy. So when he looks at it, he's just like, where in the world is this? So I always try and maintain the important classes. Like, so he knows it's a portlet. OK, he knows to start looking and manage portlets. He knows it's a link, so he knows to go look for those links. And if all else fails, he can deactivate the theme, find it, and then go from there. So then our finished product is this nice little card over here. But what I really was aiming for is it's actually V card, H card. It has all the semantics. So we actually get that precious semantic data. But as far as my users go, all they have to do is fill out those columns on that page. And that's how I'm able to like bridge that gap and give them the power to take over their content and maintain it themselves without being completely reliant on those. So another example is collections. And I've been using these because my random image thing was not a great idea. So I thought, well, how can I get a random image? A collection, because you can set a collection to just give you one random item. So I would set up a collection called, in this case, Subhero. So it's like on our subpages. And it's just looking in a particular folder for all of the image items that happen to be there. And I set up the portlets on the left. That's me setting up that collection portlet. And I've boxed kind of where I'm pulling in that Subhero collection. And I just want one single item at random. So I have my list. This is what the actual collection looks like. But on the bottom right here, that's what it turns out. So on every refresh, I would get a different image from that collection. That gives me pretty much everything I need to make a nice random image refresh. Because with Diazo, now I know it's going to be Subhero image. That's what I've always named all of them across the sites. Now, the trick is here, I'm dropping that because I don't want that portlet to be on the page. And I didn't want to match it either because it wasn't going to go in that spot. So I dropped it, which means I had to use method raw so I could still get the raw data in my XPath. And then once again, after learning about that BDS and the lovely wave of levels of content, I started setting them as background images. So you'll see towards the bottom there, I actually have the data BG source. So I loaded in that first. And then I have a jQuery. And this is kind of a standard code. If this was a slider, the jQuery will load the first image on the page load and then load the rest of them. In this case, it's just going to load this right away. But it allows me to have one set of code I can use between different sites. So I go from that little left, that portlet, to this image. And since it's a background, I can run a contain, a cover. I can keep it in the bounds, make sure it always stretches the full width of the image so it's consistent no matter what they may upload. But then when I change them, I say, if you want a new Subhero, stick it in the folder. That's all you've got to do. I'll take care of all the rest with the coding. So now page templates and tau also were a pretty big part of this process. And so I call it the other half of the magic. And I know people, from what I've talked about, seem really terrified when people get into the ZMI. And I don't blame them. We even had an incident where someone went into the ZMI and used the undo in the transaction log to undo 25 items at a time, several times. Did not work out well. It was a dexterity item. It was a couple of days of work. So I understand that, especially on a personal level. But for my purpose, I can get in there and I can do things without having to make a product, deploy it, put it in version control, restart all our sites. And once again, because we have all of these build-outs, our method is if one build-out's going to get it, they're all going to get it. But if I have to keep restarting all of these different sites, I'm going to affect everybody else who happens to be on that build out who just isn't being developed at that time, who may have already been most of the way through the project or not. So this is for that College of the Liberal Arts. That is the number of templates we ended up going through to get things to go based on those lovely PDFs I showed you earlier. But it worked out in that once we built it, we could use it again and again and again. So in cases, I built things just to get a class on there, just so I could say to my user, if you go down to this class, it'll make this page appear this way or that way. Still looks terrifying, though. So this is kind of describing that. So I made a document view, and it was just called Special Panels, because the grid, while important, doesn't matter as much to a graphic designer. So when I know my boxes go this way or this way, she's like, well, I want a mosaic of this, this, and that over there. And it still has to be responsive, and it still has to have all the data that the users can edit on their own, because when there's a change, it's a quick change. And I mean, sometimes we get stuff as in, there's an application that's going up today, the graduate students need to click on this application, today is the last day of the deadline, and we just got the email that it's been down the whole time and no one told us. That means it has to be done now. So micro changes are what we're really into, and that unfortunately doesn't let me put things through the code system, file system, do that first, because that's second. And for a graduate student, that might be the funding for them to do any of their research that year. That may be the only thing that pays for them to have a place to eat and sleep in State College. So it's very important to maintain and be able to support our users. And we have two sets of users. We have our users who use the site, who own it, and then we have the users who come to the site. And they're both equally important. But in this case, with the Special Panels view, it does that. It just puts that base, at least template-doc view spec panel. But now I can hit that with diazo specifically. So if you can see, I just have a row of portlets go all the way down on that left side there for you. But once that's on and I have the diazo, I can reorganize it into that. So everything the graphic designer hoped for, like, for example, that Apply Now button, that's actually the portal footer that I used. And I just copied the text from up above. On the left were just quick resources. Now, page template, we did have to do a page template for those connected with liberal arts voices, because it shows up in so many places, it didn't make sense to put that information into every portlet every time. And that kind of goes with that reusing blocks. If I'm going to have to use it more than 3 times, then I'm going to try and make it a block that I can use. And that keeps everything changing consistently. And that's a part of that process that when we're walking the client through, we try and make sure that they understand. If you're going to have 2 pages with the same application, one person's probably only going to remember one of them, and this one's going to get out of sync. So this is just another example of that same thing, because they thought stats looked pretty cool in infographics, so we gave it to them. And portal types. As I said, I need the names to make sense to my end users, because we would use the news item and try and use that to make slider images, because it has what you need: a title, a description, an image, basically everything you need to make a news image. But when they hear that, they're thinking, oh, it's a news item. I can't use this. I can't add this new image on the front page. So we just took the news item, copied it, renamed it to homepage images, and just slapped that in there. So now I can say, just click the homepage images, because that makes sense to my user. So that's what they'll remember, and they'll be able to, once again, be empowered to do more stuff with their site. The discovery. Once again, that takes me back to where I started, where I was in that Plone users group, and we were just kind of talking, and I went for it. I said, I'm going to show this off because I'm proud of myself. And once Eric was just like, oh, it's through the web. And I realized that we were doing something different, good or bad, didn't know quite then. But then they were in Bucharest, right? that's where they had me do a conference call with Chris, and I kind of explained it to him. And I was really happy it was a video call because I got to see his face, and he seemed genuinely excited. So, takes a little bit of the terror out, and it starts to give you some confidence, like maybe I am actually doing something great. And then Sally goes in town, and we went to lunch with Eric and Sally, and same thing, like they legitimately seemed excited. So it gave me confidence, and it gave me a really nice feeling that I was doing something. It might not be the best practice, but it was my goal to be able to use Plone for myself as best as I could, and to make sure my end users could also enjoy that. So once again, the end goal. I want my users to feel empowered. It's their website, and they can take control of it. And the entire process when I'm working on a website, this is what I'm always going for. When I hand that off, yeah, it's like giving a kid a present on Christmas. Like, they're so excited. They get to finally see it after going through all those meetings and making content outlines, and that's something they can touch, and they can click on it, and that's theirs. We're there to help them the whole way, as much or a little as they want, but it's their website, it's their content, and they can keep control of it. So, thanks for having me. I'm not sure how I did on time at all, but hopefully I took enough of it. I'm really honored to be able to speak for everybody. It's my first Plone conference, and I was blown away from the first training that I went to, so I really enjoyed my time.
So we do have time for some questions. So queue up at the microphones there, and we'll take some questions. I might kick things off. I'm curious to hear just a little bit more about sort of there's all that discovery like you were just talking about, and then when do you actually enter into that process? Are you part of that discovery?
Yeah.
You know, what exactly is the...
So, like, okay, the details on our process is what we do is we have the first voice of the client, and my boss, who's like our project manager right now, he goes to the client, he kind of warms them up, because most people don't like being told, your website's too old, we need to change it. So he goes in there, warms them up, and it's that same feeling like, we want to help you get the presence that you deserve on the internet, and gets them going. Once he's gotten them, like, here's our style guide, here's some sites we've done, here's some things to help you start thinking about what you should be doing. Then he brings in a developer and one graphic designer. And us developers, we take turns going through different ones as well as the graphic designers. Then we get to sit down. At that point, they've seen some of the things that they couldn't do and some of the things we're going to expect in them. And that's when we get to listen. And sometimes they honestly don't know. Like, they think, I want this site because this site looks awesome. It'll be like a huge image, the tiniest box of text, and just sliders. And we're like, well, who are you trying to reach out to? Well, I was like, well, we're trying to get to graduate students because we don't have enough membership right now. Not enough people are coming. So we're like, okay, what is your call to action? What do you want them to do? Well, we want them to look at our graduate programs, and we want them to look at our faculty and the places that they can explore. I'm like, okay, and how do you want them to do that? Do you want them to contact you? Do you want them to just show up? Like, what is that end user supposed to actually do to complete that call to action? That's what we listen to. And then ask guiding questions to get out of them their actual intention with the website. And once we get that, the graphic designer will usually go back, and the developer, depending on the designer, will talk back and forth, say, okay, well, you know, they really want to show off the graduate students, but they have no stories from graduate students. All they see are faculty and all these accolades. That's really intimidating when you see this person's got all these rewards. So maybe we're going to take a couple graduate students, we're going to make a slider right on the front page, right up towards the top, shallow image, so when they get on that site, they see a little bit of imagery color, but the students are front and center, and all the things that they were able to do because they were in that program can be displayed. That's the call of action they're really wanting. So that big slider, really not useful for them. But the little pockets of information, we can do that. Then the graphic designer's like, okay, I have a vision. They'll do something. Designers sometimes will be like, hey, can we do this? I'm like, we could, but it's not a good idea. I'm like, okay, well, how about this instead? Go back and forth, and then we'll finally send that mock-up to the client. The client will look at it, and they'll say, yeah or nay. It's very rare we get a complete nay. We've been pretty good so far. So that's where we get involved. And then, now the same developer that was in the meeting does not always end up doing the site. As you saw, like our timeline, sometimes you finish early, sometimes you finish late. But if the developer then comes into that, then you get to do the site. And usually the graphic designer will give you the looks, maybe a basic functionality, but at the end of the day, we're still actually implementing functionality. So like the crazy Venn diagrams I had, they actually had hover actions that they would glow and pulse when you moused over them, little circle shades, like little things to help give that user feedback when they're going. And that's where we get to play with it. And finally, the developer is usually the last person who touches that site, gets the graphic designer to say, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like, then we send it off to the client, and then we'll start conversations from there. So we really walk them through from beginning to end. It might not be the same person, but if we can, we like to guide them through the whole experience.
So being that you're sort of a flagship user of the front end of Plone, and in particular of Diazo, if you had an option to ask a room full of developers for any improvement that would make your life better, easier, more functional, what would that be? What would be sort of your list of maybe the top 2 or 3 things that might help make your life better?
Well, we're still in Plone 4.3. We're working on that next month. We're going to have time to get caught up. But I feel like Plone 5 actually hit quite a few of the things I was looking for. Like my biggest problem I had with using Diazo through the web is because we're through the web, we weren't able to register it in like portal registries for CSS, which meant we had to turn caching way, way down on our server because we would make that immediate change we needed to make. And we use Netscaler as our load balancer, would hold on to that for 2 or 3 days at a time. So we might go in through like our link that we use in the back end, but on the front end, it's their vanity URL. It's like la.psu.edu, not our server name, blah, 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 port number. So we were like, oh, it's fine. And they're like, no, it's not. We're like, what's happening? And then we finally figured out after a little bit that the Netscaler was holding things for a really long time. So being able to have that cache key on the CSS would be like one of my biggest things. So through the web, you can actually have, I don't want to say aggressive, but you can have a pretty aggressive caching of that because the cache key, once it changes, it changes. Yeah. The other thing, which the lesson SAS compiler was like, can't wait to get to 5, because in that case, it would really help. Like when I was doing the liberal arts site, we had a color-coded system. So each tab had its own color, and each color had 4 variations of that color. And she loved borders and gradients and all of this stuff. And so I just had to go through and make this huge, huge set of everything that has to be this color green here. Because if I changed it in one spot, I wanted to make sure it changed everywhere. And I didn't have like some of the minty green and a little of the limey green all together. So those are my 2 biggest things. So I feel like Plone 5 is really moving in the direction that I want to get to.
I'm curious just to hear feedback from the audience, like you've sort of gotten the idea of the work process here. I mean, do you have suggestions for, would you mind going to the mic? That would be awesome. For other tricks and tools that.
A small remark. I mean, you have one of the most difficult audiences. You have a liberal arts, so they're visual.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Matt's going to hand you the mic because we'd love to get this on
So
videotape.
you have one of the most difficult audiences you can imagine because we're dealing with liberal arts people. So they're hugely visual, and then comes some functionality like the story you just told about the onboarding when you start a new project. You have to guide them all the way. I really recognize that from some of our organizations and customers we've helped. Some others are very functional, and then you have to teach them the visual part, and they push the visual on you. They tell you exactly pixel-wise what they want, and then you can help them. Yeah, but what do you really want to have it? when you know what the visuals are. So yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any suggestions for other tools that Annette should know about, or if you do this all? Yeah.
I don't have a suggestion, but I have a similar question to Chris's, especially Diazo. There's such a big jump between a replace rule and a drop rule, and then getting into XSL templates and nested otherwise using variables and that kind of stuff. And I find it really intimidating when I'm working on a site, 'cause it's like, oh, I have to go on that wiki and copy-paste things, and it might not work. Are there any things that you find yourself doing over and over again in Diazo that you wish were baked in and easier?
That is a good question. Like, I'm actually not sure. Like, I would have to think about that. Like, most of the repetitive actions are kind of like those blocks that I have that I just, like my H card block. I know now if they have a footer with an address, that's going in. I guess the hardest thing for me sometimes is just inspecting and debugging, because debugging in Diazo is, it's like, oh, there's an error here, but like, what is the error? And that's probably where I spend the most of my time, is just like, okay, I wrote the full rule because I thought it would work. Now I have to like go back and back and back and back and like, okay, it works here, and just kind of dance towards my end goal. And sometimes my end goal rule just doesn't work, and I just have to reapproach it. But I think for the most part that, yeah, it's the refreshing. And through the web, it depends on how you run the system. So we run sometimes more on the staging side than the local side. So that's just like deactivate, reactivate. But that's more of like our fault at that point for not being in local. But so far, like, I've really melded with Diazo, because that's one of the things I love the most. It just manipulates things pretty harshly, and just I can just move it wherever I want.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. This is fantastic. I wish I could have worked with someone like you at my university. Some of the things that I've experienced with Diazo is what you were saying, to go to, well, if you don't know Diazo in and out, you have to go find samples or examples of code, and then you stick them in and you try to work with them. Mm-hmm. And earlier this week, it occurred to me that it must happen to a lot of other people too, that a feature of our Plone app theming could be to have a lot of those things templated in, so you could say, I'm going to start a new block like this, and then mm-hmm. insert the right syntax, to integrate that with the part that picks the thing right. that you want to target. I don't know if you think that would be useful to you.
No, I think it would be very useful, because it was like a lot of learning, and it was just like I was forcing myself and pushing myself, and fortunately having such a big goal really drove me to learn very quickly. And our timeline was short. We did the liberal arts site, I want to say like 6 months. We did not take a lot of time. They're like, we're getting it done. But I think especially for new users, it really is intimidating, because you can do the CSS selects, and like that gets you a good amount of the way. But once you get into really specific things, like one thing I like to do a lot is, there's the portlet wrapper, then there's the portlet name. So I'm going to hit the portlet name, but if I just drop the portlet name, it's just going to still have this empty wrapper, and that's just not good code. So like XPath, you can select grandparents and ancestors. So I can say, delete the div that happens to have the class border wrapper that is above this thing that I'm trying to hit. Like, I think those are the tricks that would really be useful for people, like examples and like those kind of blocks, like I need to hit a grandparent, or I need to hit a child or a sibling. So you can really traverse through all of the code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Annette.
Hello.
I have 2 questions. One, can you do a lightning talk on something like how to be an empathetic designer? Seriously. And the other one is not really a question, but what Kim spoke about, mm-hmm. we kind of have something that's becoming that. It's called the Diazo Snippets Library. Okay. So if you have snippets that are useful to others, you can contribute them. still trying to figure out how best to manage the process of adding new snippets and curating them. But we have about maybe 40 snippets, and they're available as a Chrome extension.
Nice.
So you can just click on the Chrome extension and filter by tags to say, I want a navigation snippet that could do this, or something for Bootstrap, or that type of thing. So that's something we could talk about.
Yeah, I definitely like to, especially like my H card. That's probably one of my favorite ones.
There you go. And I'm sure others would benefit from that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm curious about what you did for permissions, like when you passed it off to the client. Because I saw you do things like the collection for the slideshow, and you set it up a certain way, and that might not be something you want them to actually edit, or maybe it is. So do you restrict some access to things like that?
Well, fortunately, and this is kind of why I like the get it on the page simply method, is it's hard for them to mess up that part. Like if they delete the portlet, then okay, the portlet's gone, they're not gonna have an image. But like it's hard to delete a portlet by accident. Like you have to go through the whole part to do it. And that's why I like, once again, the simplest blocks and then do all the transformations through. Because that way I can give them like site admin access. And the pieces are so simple that they shouldn't be able to get rid of it. Or more so, I don't have to worry about making this div layer with all the heroes and all the LIs and all the ULs and all of that, and them deleting that. All of that's through Diazo. So in the collection, if I made a slider with just images, I would say, okay, 5 images out of whatever they did, so they don't load all 17. That'll take forever. And then all they see is the collection portlet header, which is going to be like hero or sub-hero, and that'll decide which layout it gets. And then it's just links to images. And since I can transform that into the list with all the classes and everything I need, and sometimes what I'll do is say, if you see sub-hero, load this JavaScript. If you see this, load that. So all of that happens dynamically. So the only part they can get is that little part. So that's how I protect, for the most part, my permissions. Now, if they go and delete the thing, I might take their permissions off that page to make sure they don't do it again. But everybody gets a clean slate when they start.
Okay, thanks.
That's it. I just want to say we have maybe time for, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes more. So let's try to fit in all this stuff.
Okay, quick question. We had some customers that experienced performance problems with Diazo. Do you have had some problems or had to solve these problems, or does it just work?
Yeah, and I know Chrissy has touched on this too, where if your rule searches too much content, you will get a performance problem. Now, as far as the way I've tried to deal with it is, we have the NetScaler, which is, I'm not sure. Is anybody familiar with NetScaler?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's exactly how I usually feel about it too. So the NetScaler is, we've been working with those network admins to kind of get us in a good space. So hopefully, if the rules are really aggressive, we go through and like, if I do a new site, I will go and click everything the first time just to make sure I'm the one who's suffering with all of the slowness if it's gonna get slow. But hopefully then the NetScaler will say, oh, I already got this page. We don't need Plone for this, here. And that's usually my best way to skirt around the performance. But if you really want to get the best experience and the best practice, it's just when you refresh, you just kind of keep your network window open, look how it loads, look how long the HTML takes, look how much all the asynchronous content and stuff takes. And then you can say, whoa, this rule just like put on a whole nother second on my load time. Maybe I need to reapproach that a different way, or maybe I need to be more specific so I'm not trying to search everything that has this class. You know where it is. It's like it's in the body tag, it's in TD portal column 1, it's in that portlet. You can get more specific and just get what you need at that point. And that's probably the best way to go with it.
Thanks, Annette, for the fantastic talk. As I'm also from a university, I always see that the problem to empower the people is to get them in and encourage them to work with the things. On the other side, we do see the proud things we do from the Plone side with security, with the different roles, so that someone could not screw up the page in total. But at the university, you do have normally these politics things, so that they want oh, give me the admin control for the whole site. I will unscrew that up. And so how did you get the people for doing it without screwing up your site and get that empowering you do?
Yeah. So I think my approach on that is training and honest training. Like, I will tell them, it's like, you can go into this box and you can do it. It works like a word processor. You can do that stuff. That's great. There's this HTML button. You can click it or not click it. That's your option. But one of the big things that we do is part of our website process is after we polish and we deliver, we train you. And my practice most times is if I don't train you, you're not getting in there. When I train you, one of the things I teach you how to do is how to reset your password if it's forgotten. I usually have the account there, so that's the first time they get in. And I teach them how to manage personnel and people. So until they get into my door, they're probably not even going to have access. So that helps a little bit. It's just like, if you want your site, you're going to have to get in here. We're going to have to teach you how to use it. Now, some people are just like, I got this. I'm great. I know what to do. And we'll give it to you. But we also are very realistic, and I say this almost every time, several times. I said, if you are on your site and you make a big, bad mess, like you're just like, I just dropped the whole faculty staff directory, stop. Right there, don't do anything, don't panic, keep a cool head, don't try and click, don't try and recover. Call us, and I mean call us, not an email, call us right away. And I always say, because the more moves you make after that, the more unlikely we can recover your content. And that's part of that honest thing. Like, I don't want to scare them, but I want to be honest and flat with them that there's only so much we can do. And I think so far that's worked very well. Now, we've had people like completely change displays and break pages, and when I write templates, I try and, on error, nothing. So at least they just have a blank page rather than this traceback or the site admin code or stuff like that. And it's worked for us pretty well so far. Josh, you're back there? Has it worked for you too?
Sorry, what was the question?
Good job, Josh. As far as giving permissions and making sure that with their permissions, they don't delete the whole site out of oblivion.
Yes, it definitely works. And like we said, it's heavily on training and heavily on call us if you feel wary at all.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, and part of that is probably like, we build a pretty close relationship to most of the people because, once again, we're handling your site most of the way through. And you're not alone. We're not just going to tell you to give us the stuff and we're going to do it. We're going to be with you. And I think that relationship and the honesty and just saying, you can mess this up. I know you can. Try not to do it really helps.
I'm really sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to cut the conversation short because there's so much more to. What I'm going to suggest is that somebody on that BOF sheet, somebody makes a section in the BOF to talk about this stuff some more because there's clearly just a lot more of. A lot more stuff we say. We kind of need to get out to do the picture, sorry. So I want to make sure you follow Chris to get to the picture, and let's give Annette another round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.